So we talked about benefit group in pretty much in detail. And the reason we did that is kind of this is the core of the benefit setup. And once we have a benefit group and all of the other components, then we can make the benefit plan. But in order to make the benefit plans, there are some things that we still need to go over in class. Like, in order to make a plan, you need to know who the plan provider is going to be. So, for example, for a health plan such as Kaiser, well, for a Kaiser health plan, you need Kaiser. For other medical plans, if it's a PPO, for example, it might be United Healthcare or whoever is going to be the vendor for that benefit. So we need to create that provider in within Workday, and then we also need to provide the coverage targets and coverage types, and then we could go ahead and make the actual benefit plan. So the goal today is that at least we get to make at least two type of benefit plans. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to make the we need to, if we're starting from scratch, we need to do is what's called we need to create a benefit electronic signature task. So this is basically a text that will appear at the end of benefit sign-up form that tells the employees, that says, please acknowledge that your name written electronically over here, it will be accepted as an electronic signature. So you could have one signature for all of your plans, or you could have a separate signature with separate text for each of your plans, depending on whatever the company requirement is. And some plans don't require any signature, but medical plans and dental and vision and life insurance, they should have an electronic signature text that should already be, that should already be in Workday when it was when benefits was implemented, or if it's going to be a new one, then you could create that. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that in this task, we basically create a basically this is going to be text that tells employee that they acknowledge the entry of their name as electronic signature. So I will just quickly show in the GMS tenant that particular task. So the task name is maintain benefit electronic signature. And it needs the proper access to access it. So seems like she does not, our favorite user does not have the access to that. Oh, yeah, I was spelling it wrong. I had electronics or something, but it's supposed to be maintain benefit electronic signatures. So let me correct that in my Excel file. Maintain benefit electronic signature. Yeah, I put electronics. So in the system by default, in the training system, there's already existing electronic signatures, and they have been, you could create them for a country or for a plan. So here we see electronic signature for Japan, and it's in Japanese. And it has a restriction that is only for Japan. And it has a restricted to benefit group. We could create a new one, and we give it a name. And we could say, say RM, we could say Kaiser, and an example of this text could be something from above over here. So basically, this is some legal text that the benefits administration person, they will give you to add in here, but it basically says, your name and password are considered as electronic signature and will serve as confirmation of the accuracy of the information being submitted. So when the employee, either at the end of open enrollment or whenever they sign up for benefits, they're confirming that whatever they have selected is correct, and by entering their name, they're basically saying that is allowed as an electronic signature. And then you can restrict that to certain countries or to groups. So I will create this for, there should be a group in there already for United States. Okay. Any questions on what is a electronic signature and where it's used? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and enter that in. Okay, so after this electronic signature, we have to enter providers. So provider would be, for example, UHC, which is United Healthcare, or Kaiser, or any other ones. And the information that we have to enter is the task name, which is create benefit provider. We have to enter an effective date, the name of the provider. If we have their website, we can enter their URL. These are not required fields. If we know their provider ID type, we could enter that, but it's not required. And the actual provider ID. This will be required, even though it's not required on the screen, but if you have an integration going to that provider, you have to make sure you consider that the integration field provider ID may be required. So we do need to ask the benefits administrator what is the ID for that particular vendor. And then if there's going to be a signature field at the end of that, then you add the signature that we created in the previous section. Okay, so we're going to create a provider in our training tenant. They will tell us who the providers are going to be, what their ID number is or their tax ID number. And they will also tell us if we need an electronic signature or not. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the electronic signature that we created, the one that was RM Kaiser plan. I misspelled it, but I'm going to go ahead and select it here. Because benefit plan needs to know who the provider is, and it's going to need to know whether there's an electronic signature or not, and a couple other things. We actually, like the signatures that we sign here, they're there because this is a training tenant.
Right.
But at an implementation time, we actually have to create them ourselves. And so you get the text. The text will come from the HR partner.
Okay.
And then you basically add that text into that field, where I enter some generic text. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create this UHC. UHC is a health provider in the US. So actually, I'm going to abbreviate this as UHC. So I'm going to click OK. So we have created a provider. So there's a message came in text, in chat. This question is that if there is no in-house benefits and only the integrations are implemented, and then what are all the setups we have to do? So if you don't actually have benefits within Workday in-house, then you only need to send the employee demographic data to the benefit providers. So in that case, there will be third-party benefit provider that exists. We have to send data to them, and you have to send employee data or terminated employee data and any changes that happen through an integration. And that integration could be just a simple, either an outbound EIB or Cloud Connect. So if the benefits is not being administered through Workday, and then we just create a file of the employee data and send it to whoever is administering it. So in this example, we just created the provider. In real life, you're going to have more than one provider. This is a UHC as a provider. If the company also has Kaiser, then we'll need to create one for Kaiser. You'll have to create it for your dental provider, your vision provider, life insurance, and if you have any other kind of benefits, as for example, you may have pet insurance. So you'll need a provider of whoever's offering that pet insurance. So after we create the signature and provider, we need to create what's called the coverage targets. So example of a coverage target is the categories of the coverage types. Like for example, it's going to be employee plus spouse, or it's going to be employee plus child, employee plus family. If there is a spouse and a child or multiple children, they're all considered. So you don't have to say child and multiple children or spouse separately. You could just call that employee plus family. Or it could be coverage could only be employee only. So these are called healthcare coverage targets. And we define these within Workday, and then we're going to add rates to them. So you might say, okay, for your medical plan, if you're going to select employee plus spouse, there's going to be a rate for that. if it's going to be just employee only, there might be a cheaper rate. So based on the target, we're going to create, or we're going to enter rates. And the coverage targets are maintained under maintain healthcare coverage targets. So this screen, there's a lot of stuff on here, but it's basically is these targets, and then it has the name of the target. So in this example, it's going to be employee plus spouse, minimum count, like how many, what's the minimum number of folks can be in this category. So if it's employee plus spouse, so at the minimum it has to be 2, right? What's the maximum count? It will be employee plus spouse, it will be 2. Valid dependent types, and the coverage target, depending on whatever the company's policy is, they will tell you what are the dependent types. And then we have to repeat these values for each of the targets. So what we see in Workday is basically this, but in a horizontal form. The number of dependents that could be. So, when we're signing up for benefits, the person who's signing up, if they may be signing up for benefit just for themselves, so they'll need to select employee only, or they may have a family and they want to sign up for themselves and family. So they need a category called employee plus family, or they just might want to cover themselves and a child, or they might just need a category for employee plus spouse. So these categories are called targets. And for every category, if it needs a separate rate, then it should be a separate category. So, for example, if the rate between employee plus family and employee plus spouse, so let me just create a column called rate. Okay. Say, for example, if it cost $60 for the benefit if employee plus spouse is selected, and for family it might be 75, for employee only it might be 40, and employee plus child it might be 50. So based on what the company like, if they, based on how they want to give the options to their employees to sign up, they might have different targets that you need to create. If the company only cares about employee only and everything else could be just employee or family, then they may not need a separate category called child or employee plus spouse. They might just need 2 targets. But if they charged separately for benefits and a separate price for that category, so basically you need to create these as categories. So these categories are called coverage targets, and the display order is the order of display that shows up on the benefits screen where you actually sign up for benefits. So whatever has the display order 1, that will show up first in that list. And then the next coverage target, and then so basically you control how it shows up on that form using the display order. Because if it was only one, then it would be the same as employee plus one dependent. So yes, otherwise they will do employee plus one. So, and these are not like hard and fast. This is going to be, it's going to vary for every company, right? They're going to, like the client that I'm working on right now, they don't have employee plus one dependent. So it'll depend on how tightly they want to, like how precisely they want to define the coverage targets. Okay. And so who the number, the minimum number of dependent count and the maximum, and then which type of dependents can be counted as part of this. So if you select employee plus one dependent, which dependent types can you cover? So in the US, you could only cover your own child or an adopted child, and you could cover your spouse. Typically, you cannot cover your own parents or child's grandparents. So you make that restriction over here. So you're saying that if someone selects employee plus dependent, they could only select a child or a spouse in this category. Some companies separate, have an employee plus domestic partner, and some companies will just say employee plus spouse. They will not differentiate between a domestic partner or a spouse, because the rate is going to be the same. So they don't want to have an extra category for that. Later on, we'll learn about what's called a HSA plan. So with respect to a health savings account coverage target, if someone selects, whatever target over here, we need to map that to an HSA coverage target. So you could see, for the purpose of HSA, regardless of whatever coverage that was over here, it maps to family. So that's pretty much true for all of the coverage targets. If we needed to create a new one, it's simply a matter of clicking on this plus. You have to give it a unique name. So because it's a training environment, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's already been created. So just start off with your initials and then add, the coverage target. So this could be E. The system won't accept it if you have the same target name. And for valid dependent types, and then if you need to make them inactive, the inactive column is to the very right-hand side. Okay, here's the one that I just created. Okay, so now this comes, the next one is called configure relationships. Here, I only selected child, domestic partner, and spouse, right? Now, they want to be more with the times. Let's say, for example, you're in a country that recognizes same-sex spouse, and they want to, in their benefits rollout, you do want to indicate that you don't want to just say spouse, you want to say spouse and same-sex spouse. So you may need to edit this. Um, or so you'll come to this screen and you could edit the dependent types that are valid. The company may be losing money, they want to restrict benefits, and maybe they want to allow no more than 3, or say like they want to allow no more than 4 dependents even in the family category. So you may change it here. But normally this won't change because it's not like something that changes all the time, but you do need to set it up, and you do need to be aware where this information is housed. So when I say like relationship setup within Workday, um, there's obviously relationships such as a dependent. There's something called beneficiary, and then so we have to indicate like who can be a dependent and who could be a beneficiary. So for dependent, like a spouse could be considered a dependent, a child could be a dependent, or a domestic partner could be a dependent. But a grandparent cannot, or a parent, they cannot be a dependent. But for beneficiary, if you were to list, who could be my beneficiary for life insurance, for example, it could be anyone. So I could even list a neighbor down the street as my beneficiary. So that type of restriction of that relationship type. Another example would be like, for the category of, say we have child, for a relationship type of child, it doesn't need to be restricted to anything, because a child could be a beneficiary, a child could be a dependent, a child could be an emergency. No, I meant to say emergency contact. Well, yeah, okay. So a child could be beneficiary, dependent, or emergency contact. But like I said, a grandparent, it could only be a beneficiary or an emergency contact, but it cannot be a dependent. So defining that type of relationship is done under the task called maintain related person relationships. But this is more likely to be changed than the coverage types. Okay, so over here we see the relationship name and the order they will show up, and what are they mapped to within Workday, and if they have any restrictions on it. For a grandparent, ideally, you should have this restricted to emergency contact and beneficiary. Same thing for aunt, uncle, friend. None of these can be dependents. Child, like we spoke of, we don't need to restrict it because there could be all three of these. So there's this column over here. This is new functionality that says include relationship for wellness. There is a screen where you could indicate or where you could save information regarding like their wellness data, like their heart rate, everything that's considered like health or wellness type. So if you check this, then this relationship type will show up on that wellness page. Actually, I have not even come across any company that's using it yet, but I think as we become more and more mobile and we're using, the mobile Workday, people will, start to use Workday to house, a lot of the wellness data. But basically, we do need to populate this at one time, or at least review it to make sure the restricted to relationships are selected properly. So in this, for example, we saw none of these are selected. So we should select them as spouse could be a dependent, beneficiary, and emergency contact. Ex-spouse, it could only be an emergency contact or a beneficiary, like that. Okay, so now we have to create the healthcare classifications. The classifications are basically for US. I don't think other countries use them. And they refer to the type of provider organization. So most of the healthcare providers are called preferred provider organizations. So they're PPO, or they're health management organizations, HMO. So Kaiser would be an HMO. United Healthcare is a PPO, and there's VSP for vision, and they're called VSP, Vision Service Provider. The type of healthcare organization it is required for the US integrations. So because there's a field in the integration that says, who is the provider, what type, and what type of provider they are. So we need to go to maintain healthcare classifications, and this will change. Like for example, you may start offering a plan. It might be like a new type of plan, and if you did not offer that before, then as a member of the sport team, you will have to create a healthcare classifications for it. So it's under maintain healthcare classifications. I must have a typo in here somewhere. Yep, it's healthcare as 2 words. Okay, so pretty straightforward setup. DMO, if it's a dental management organization, this one, HDHP, this is an example of high deductible health plan. So, a lot of companies have started to have high deductible health plans available, and previously they did not. So this was actually something I had to create recently as part of the last open enrollment because they did not have HDHP. But basically it was pretty straightforward. You just need to indicate that up here, their name. And then we have the HMO organizations, preferred provider, and VSP, and then DMO for dental. This POS, I can't remember what this is for. Yeah, I can't remember what POS is. Okay, those are the healthcare classifications, pretty straightforward. We also need to indicate coverage types that are available because every benefit plan, you need to have the coverage types for it. So the menu for that is maintain coverage types. And then, so once we go there, we're going to select the type of coverage type and enter appropriate classifications as requested by the benefits administrator. Check only one election if only one plan can be selected at a time. Check other columns based on business decisions. So let me show you guys what that page looks like. Okay, so this page has a lot of information, but don't be scared, it's just actually pretty straightforward. There's healthcare coverage types, health saving account coverage types, which is HSA. Then there's spending account coverage types, which is FSA. Insurance coverage types, retirement savings, and if there was any additional benefit coverage types. But most of the time you'll be working with just all the top ones, probably not the additional benefit coverage type. Okay, so under healthcare, this would be the medical, dental, vision, international medical would be an example of that. So medical is already created over here. And assume I was going to create it again. Well, more than actually creating a new coverage type, which is not likely, would actually modify the classifications that go under that. So I'm not going to create a new one because under healthcare, it's going to be medical, dental, vision, health, and if it may be international medical as well. The classifications, the company, like I said, they may not currently have high deductible health plan, so that may not be there, but going forward, they are going to offer a high deductible health plan. And so before you could create that plan, you need to come to the healthcare coverage type and enter high deductible health plan as part of the healthcare coverage types. This column called icon, we have selected by default heart. So this icon in the shape of a heart, this will show up on the benefits enrollment page, whether you're doing enrollment at time of hire or at open enrollment. So these images or whatever icon or image you have selected, it will show up as an image on that screen. Only one election. This indicates, can you by checking this checkbox, you're restricted to only having one medical plan. So you cannot be an HMO and PPO at the same time. You will have to select one. And this column enforces that rule. And if it's a mandatory, then this will be checked. And then if you want to display the employee cost, you will check this. If you want to display the employer portion of the cost as well, then you check this. If the company has flexible credits, then you select that. And if it's a medical coverage type, so this will be checked only for the medical coverage type. The next column, use coverage from plan year end. So if you're going to use the whatever coverage existed at the previous plan year and you're going to take it forward, you will check this. And if this plan is going to be eligible for COBRA, you want to make sure this is selected. Not all plans are going to be eligible for COBRA. So only the medical, dental, and vision are the ones that are eligible for COBRA. So while it looks like there's a lot of stuff on the screen, is actually you're just basically telling the system that under the medical coverage type, what are the classifications that are allowed? So whatever the coverage that employee had at the previous plan year end, and then you want to allow, you don't want to mandate that, but you want to allow that same coverage to default in as the new coverage for the next year. So just like medical, we have dental, and then the classifications that are allowed for that, for vision. Let me minimize this area. Okay. Okay, so these were the healthcare coverage types. There's also the health saving account. There should only be one. Yep, only a health saving account. HSA is like a financial money account where if a company offers it, you indicate how much money you want to set aside from your paycheck, and you actually set up a bank account with the provider, and the company will also put money into that account. I believe it's like $1,500 per year for employee only, and like $2,500. So typically, the icon that was used, for that is bank. Like it would be like a symbol of a bank or a symbol of a dollar sign. And then these columns would be checked as appropriate. So this is for HSA. And then similar to HSA, but it is a different category altogether, is a FSA. So there's two types of FSA. There's healthcare FSA, and then there's dependent care FSA. And then there might be, childcare vouchers, but these two are the most common: healthcare FSA and the dependent care FSA. And then insurance coverage types. So we have here is the basic group life coverage. Who is eligible for that? And so for basic group, only the employee is eligible. For voluntary supplemental, is only employee. For spouse life, if they have a separate plan, then that would be for the spouse. So seems like in this setup, there is no life insurance policy for child. It's just for employee and spouse. But it's the same columns. Do you want to display the employee cost, employer cost, if it's COBRA eligible? So obviously, life insurance that's offered by the company is not, it doesn't transfer over after you terminate. So it's not COBRA eligible. Retirement savings is typically not administered through Workday, but some companies may have it. They might just collect the demographic information and then send it to a 401k provider. But they may allow people to sign up for 401k through Workday benefits. So that's why in this case we have a 401k as a retirement saving coverage type. Okay, so in these coverage types, typically there won't be any changes. But like I said, a lot of companies, while they have standard benefits, they may have, health, medical, vision, and flexible spending, but they may not have a high deductible medical plan. So if they say, hey, we need to create a high deductible plan, where would you go first to add that as a coverage type? So let me repeat that. If we need to add a what's called a high deductible medical plan, and before we make that as a plan, we need to add it as a coverage type here. Where should I add that? So probably the most two likely scenarios is going to be healthcare coverage type or HSA, health savings account. So it'll be under healthcare coverage type, and then we would go over here. We would add the high deductible health plan in here. Or we decided at open enrollment, you know what, we don't want to show a picture of the heart, we want to change it to something else. So these are the other images. Oh, this one looks nicer. So we're gonna choose this one. So now when employees go on the enrollment screen, especially on their phone, on the Workday mobile, these icons show up instead of just the word medical. So this is where you control which icon shows up. I suppose for vision, you could use these, the eyeglasses. We're going to talk about what makes up the type of medical, not medical plan, but we're just going to talk about benefit plan, and we'll see an example of some that had already been created. And once again, the plans do require an eligibility rule. Just like we saw in advanced comp, there was an eligibility rule for every plan to indicate who is eligible. Same way, every benefit plan needs a benefit eligibility rule to indicate the eligible population. So let me pull an example of a plan that's already in the system. You guys could do the same. So it would be, for example, let's pull up medical Aetna HMO. And we want to see the data as of 0101. So here we see that its healthcare rate type is flat rate. So that means the rate that you pay to be on this plan is not based on salary. It's a flat rate for employee. There might be a different rate for employee plus family, but it's a flat rate. And who is the provider? The provider is listed here. And what type of coverage type it has is it's a medical plan. What type of healthcare classification? This is an HMO plan. And the name is left blank. The reason it's left blank is because on the enrollment screen, this name right here, the medical Aetna plan, is derived from the coverage type is medical, then it has the provider, and then the healthcare classification. So you would automatically already by default see medical Aetna HMO on the benefits page. So if you were to just write, Aetna HMO, then it will basically just duplicate, the name that you already have. So typically, you're not going to have a plan name because unless the plan name you're going to give it is something going to be very different than the default combination. It has some description you can write on there. The description shows up on the enrollment screen, so it's good to have what this plan is about. And if there was a group policy number, you would enter that up here. Some integrations will require it if you're sending this data, some won't. So check the integration requirements. And there's also what's called a group policy number. If it's provided by the benefits partner, enter that here. Otherwise, it's not required. Participating benefit groups. If you see, this is active employees in the US, hourly, salaried, and retirees. And then it says not in California. So these are eligibility rules that have been created. So when you're setting up a plan, you need to know who is eligible, and then you need to make sure that there's either an existing rule that will satisfy that requirement, or you have to create that rule. And these are the benefit groups, actually, like the example of the benefit group that we went through yesterday. So I'm going to open this up in a new tab. So yesterday we saw the benefit group, active employee, US hourly, and salaried. So we were talking about how one plan can be in multiple benefit groups. So we see that the medical Aetna plan is part of these three groups, because members of these three groups, they're all eligible for the medical Aetna plan. So, and as far as the worker plan eligibility, it has the criteria not in California or retiree. So let's see what makes up that. Okay, so basically we want to make sure that for that particular plan is open to anybody except anybody who lives outside of California and is a retiree. Dependent plan eligibility. This is very critical because this is where you indicate if there's going to be age-based eligibility for a dependent, plus is there going to be a spouse or domestic partner. So here it says for dependent benefit eligibility rule, it says relationship is as long as it's a domestic partner, same-sex spouse, or the relationship is a child, and age is less than 26, or the child is disabled. Because if a child is disabled, they're allowed to be on benefits even after they're 26. So you want to make sure that this rule is on all U.S. medical, dental, and vision plans. In this case, in this example, there's also an overage dependent eligibility. This would be company specific. Requires provider ID. At the time of enrollment, are you going to require the are you going to require that this for this plan there has to be a provider ID? Then you would select that. Auto enrollment. The benefits partner will tell you that if this is going to be something that's auto enrolled, or whether the benefits partner has to do the enrollment or the employee has to do the enrollment themselves. If it was a high deductible health plan, you would click here. For rates, drive coverage targets, that's typically lets the Workday know that employees and employer costs can be overridden, and you could use, that's the individual rates. Individual rates kind of a strange feature. It basically overrides the standard rates so that you may put in a specific rate for an individual. So if someone is a smoker, it allows you as the benefits administrator to have a higher rate for those who smoke at the individual level. Then we have currency, frequency, earnings and deduction types. And in this section, for U.S. Affordable Care Act, or the ACA Act, you have to indicate if the company is self-insured or they're fully funded. And the only way to know that is you have to ask the benefits administrator. And if they meet the qualifications for a minimum value coverage, that means the company pays for at least 60% of the cost, then this has to be checked. At the bottom, we see the different rate tables. So we see that for the benefit group of active employees in the US, hourly and salary, for both of these groups, for employee only, we have a column for employee cost pre-tax, and then the employee post-tax, and then the employer cost and the employer cost taxable. So these amounts, whatever is entered here, it shows up when the employee is doing the enrollment. They could see how much it's going to cost them pre-tax and how much it's going to cost them post-tax. So usually for employees, the money is taken out pre-tax. That's why the post-tax column is blank. So we have employee only rate, we have employee plus one dependent rate. So the rates would be given to you by the benefits administrator, and you could actually upload the rates for all of the plans using EIP, which makes it much more easier because see there's a lot of columns over here and it's easy to mess up. But if you have everything in a CSV file, then you could audit there once and then just upload it. So it's actually much more easier just to upload the rates. And then the rates do change every year. So it's good to know which EIP to use and the template. So I will actually upload the template that's used for the rates. For the earnings and deductions, those are the components that get used in payroll deductions. So when you're setting up payroll, you're going to indicate, okay, what are the earning code that this plan is eligible for. So at that time, you will come up here based on the implementation requirements for earnings, and you could enter them over here. But let me, this was an overview of a medical plan. The plan has eligibility rules, groups, and the rates. So next, we're actually going to create one. But before we create a medical plan or any other type of plan, we do need to create its rates. So there's a message in chat that we cannot hear you, so I'm actually not able to hear you guys. I thought you guys were just quiet. No, so basically the earnings and deduction would be, that's the deduction used to calculate employee pre- and post-tax cost. This is actually used with the payroll interface. So as far as doing the setup of the benefits and the rates,
right,
you don't need to enter anything in the earning and deductions. So unless you're using Workday payroll, this does not need to be populated. Yeah, so these deductions would be used to calculate the employee pre- and post-tax cost. Deductions used to calculate employer cost that are not taxable to the employee, and like any earnings that are used to calculate the employer costs that are taxed to the employee. So you would set these up. Let me open that up in a new tab. So on the payroll side, you have to set up things called like earnings.
right.
So here, because you're getting this benefit and you're paying $92 for it, and employers is contributing $196 to it. So the company might have to treat this as a earning, or they might treat, well, this is your pre-tax, but like whatever the dollar cost to the company, they're taking it as, hey, this is your earnings. So for purpose of some payroll, yeah, so they will validate it and give you the, like, every year they're going to review their benefit contract with the vendors. So based on their contract and cost, these amounts will change. And then they will say, okay, now we need to update the rates. And they'll give it to you, ask for it in an Excel form, so you could easily convert it into an EIB and upload it. But once you upload it, you do need to validate that the upload was correct or the data entry was correct and it matches, what they gave you. Yeah, so you do need to audit your load file or manual against what was added, because this is very critical that it has to be correct. So this is pretty much flat rates, but if it was like for life insurance, then this would be based on a percent of salary. And I'm going to create so similar to this plan, we'll create a new one. Let me open that up in a separate tab. We saw one here that was in our training environment. That's created by either by another student or by Workday as part of training. I want to show you some screen of a real life one first, and I have some screenshots in this one. But basically the same thing. In this example, this is a medical HMO. Once again, even in real life, we left the benefit plan name blank because system is going to show medical and then it's going to show HMO. There is a group policy number, but typically no description or plan description. The benefit group, so in this case, it was active US employees, and who's eligible for it is going to be, in this case, because this is HMO, medical, so means this is Kaiser, and Kaiser is only for California residents. So the rule was California residents who have at least 20, who work at least 20 hours per week. And if you want to see how that rule is made up, because this is a very common rule for California, so I took a screenshot of that. So it would be like right now, this says view benefit plan eligibility rule, but if you're creating it for the first time, then it would be create benefit plan eligibility rule. And then you'll give it a name and then the logic, the rule conditions. So in the source field, it would be primary home address state. So the state in the selection list of California, scheduled weekly hours, 20. So that means the person must be working at least 20 hours in order to be eligible for this plan. So it's a very common, normal example of a benefit plan eligibility rule. You might, the number of hours, some companies might require that you work at least 30 hours in order to be eligible. This one particular company was very lax, and they said, as long as you're working 20 hours, you're still eligible for the plan. Okay, so that was the worker plan eligibility. Then there is the dependent plan eligibility, which is Okay, so what rules is going to drive which dependents are eligible? So this is a similar one that we saw in training, but basically this says view dependent benefit eligibility rule. But if you're creating it for the first time, it will be create dependent benefit eligibility rule. And you have to select spouse or domestic partner. Spouse/domestic partner true, or child is less than 26 or disabled, and if that condition is true. If I expand that, these conditions, if I expand these as individual conditions, then that was built on another rule that basically said relationship type is equal to domestic partner and spouse. And the age 26 rule, that's based on saying that, hey, if the relationship is a child or a domestic partner child and the age is less than 26, or disabled equal yes, because disabled is a field on the dependent contact form. So if that's checked as yes, or if the age is less than 26, then the person is eligible. And here I just provided a screenshot of where you go to create the benefit eligibility rules like the ones we just saw in these screenshots. So it's under the create benefit eligibility rule, and then you would either select benefit group eligibility rule or benefit plan eligibility rule, or you could select dependent benefit eligibility rule. So in this last screenshot, this was with respect to the dependent eligibility rule. So if we were creating that for the first time, then we would have selected dependent eligibility rule before we went to the next screen. So just FYI, that the real world plans look pretty much like we saw in the training, but your eligibility criteria must be very tight. And as far as the rates, we do need to create the rates first before we create the plan. Okay, so we'll just go to create healthcare rate, which coverage targets. So we'll select some coverage targets and then we'll enter the rates. So let me move this out of the way. Okay, so to manually create healthcare rates, we type create healthcare rate. You want to make sure the effective date is clear, and you get this information. Like this rate is going to be effective, for example, 2021. Say like if this was close to open enrollment time and we're in like November or December 2020 and we needed new rates, but since we're not at the end of the year, perhaps these rates are effective from January 1st of this year. The method for rate calculation is if the rates are given to you for employee and employee plus family, and here's a rate for employee plus child, that is called a flat amount. If it was going to be based on your salary, like 3% of your salary, then obviously you'll select this. But unless you're dealing with like life insurance, it's going to be flat amount. And life insurance or some medical plans in Hawaii, they use percent of salary with a flat amount. But that's a very small use case. Typically, I only heard of it in the state of Hawaii where they use percent of salary and a flat amount. But for medical, dental, vision, typically in the United States, is excluding Hawaii, is going to be a flat amount. For our purpose, if the rates are given to us as flat amount, then these demographic factors do not apply. So we're going to leave that as none of the above. So once I clicked OK, the rate band definition area opened up. So here we're going to indicate that is this going to be employee only, employee plus one? So all of the ones that are coverage targets that are applicable, we're going to select them from here. So when you see a list like this and everything is applicable, then if you hold down your shift key and then go to the very last item and then left click, then they all get selected at once. So shift and then left click. But for the purposes of rates, that's not going to be true. We're not going to select every single one of these. We're going to say we'll select employee plus dependent, employee plus domestic partner, and family, and employee only. So we'll select, actually domestic partner does not make sense because we already have domestic partner or family. So let's just select one of these. So now another tab shows up right here called rate bands. This is where we manually enter the rate. I think I accidentally clicked edit OK twice. Okay, so the coverage targets that I selected on the previous screen, the employee plus domestic partner, family, they're listed over here, and we get to enter their employee cost pre-tax. So this might be, for example, $75 for employee plus family. It might be 100, and employee only might be 50. And for employer cost, we could say this is 320. This might be 200, and this might be 100. If you needed to add another target that you did not select before, so we see that we have employee plus spouse, we have employee plus family, we have employee only. But what if the employee wanted to cover the employee plus their children, but not the spouse, because maybe the spouse has coverage through his or her own company? So we could add a coverage target from here. And See, I don't see, we have employee plus one dependent. Ideally, I'd like to have seen a coverage target that said employee plus child, and we do not have that. When we were on the coverage target, I created one that says employee plus family. I should have noticed that there was no employee plus children and created that one. So anyways, maybe when you guys log on to the training server, make sure you create a coverage target that says employee plus children. Oh, you guys did not correct me. I was saying this is the employer cost, but that actually should have been in this column, not this column. Okay, so we got the employer cost, and so now, and it's the rate, it's called RM, Kaiser rates. So we'll create a Kaiser plan and use it in that one. Okay, so the rates have been created. It's typically going to be 1-to-1. Like this is the rate for the Kaiser plan. I'll have a separate rate table for the vision plan, a separate rate table for the dental plan, and a separate one for the PPO. I mean, by chance, it might be the same rates, or somehow, based on the benefit cost, it might end up being the same. And in that case, you might be lucky and you just need one, but I've never seen it the same, more than one plan. You'll change them at two times. One would be if the company changes the carriers, and they could do that. Well, they usually do that at the time of open enrollment. And because they're changing carriers, in that case, you will have to create a new plan and the new rates, as well as the provider. If they're not changing carriers, but because it's a new year, new contract negotiations, new cost, so you will have to change it at that time as well. Yes, you will need an effective date. So for example, in this, Google Doc, the one I posted before, and then in this one as well, this one has the create benefit plan, and I have an example of Kaiser, right? So you could take this one. I'm giving you the fields and what you should enter.
Okay.
But now instead of creating a Kaiser plan, perhaps create a dental plan or a vision plan. And as far as what to enter in those fields, look at the existing dental or vision plan that's in the system. The only thing that will be different, obviously, is going to be the healthcare classifications. It may not be HMO, it's going to be DMO or VSP. And then you may choose an existing worker plan eligibility, or you could create a new one, like I have in these screenshots. But make sure you know how to create one. And I'm already giving you, you could copy exactly word for word, and you could make this, you could make this particular eligibility that I have in this screenshot. the sequence was, like the foundational concepts that we did, like, the signature, the provider, all of those things. And then when we got all of that done, then we needed to create the rate first. So let me actually move the rate tab to the left, because you have to create the rates first, and then the plan. Okay, so create benefit plan is the task name. So effective date, if it's going to be a new plan for the current year, 01/01/2020. Who's going to be the benefit provider? So this list is going to be the ones that, when you were creating the benefit providers, this is where that list comes from. So here's the, there's one provider I had created called RM UHC, benefit plan type. So is there going to be a healthcare coverage plan, HSA, retirement, or spending account? So this, in this case, is going to be a healthcare coverage plan. And healthcare rate type is going to be a flat rate. So this cannot be changed after the plan is created. So make sure that confirm with the benefits partner, like whatever the healthcare rate type is going to be, whether it's going to be flat rate or calculated. But typically for medical, dental, vision, it's going to be flat rate. So you might have a pet insurance, or you might have, some random plan that a company may offer. That's outside of the traditional health plan or health savings or insurance or retirement. So if it was for like pet insurance, then you would just choose health. You'll choose the additional benefit plan. And healthcare coverage type. So since we're talking about a medical plan, I'm going to choose health. Healthcare classification. This is a PPO. Let me see if I choose dental, does it allow me? Okay. So we do have healthcare classifications that are part of the dental, but not part of the medical one. Let me try to set it up as a Kaiser plan. Let's see, medical plan type. Okay, so that has been, it had all of the foundational, the prerequisites. So now, United UHC or United Healthcare, that could be a PPO, or it could also be a high deductible plan. So I'm going to choose PPO for now. Policy number, we don't have that. Which groups are eligible for this? So I'm going to choose something that's in the States. salaried, I believe that's the name of the group. Active employees in the US, salaried and hourly. Worker plan eligibility. So typically they have to be working at least 20 or 30 hours, and they have to be regular employees. So there's probably already some kind of eligibility rule that's already exists in the system I could use. So let me see what's out there. If I say 21 years or older, that's part of the requirement, but I also need to make sure that they're employed at least, part-time. So to mirror exactly what that is, in this case, that's why I created this Excel sheet, right? It may not mirror exactly like, I'm not putting in, well, I kind of am giving you exactly how I know the activity guide looks, and it will give you, these particular fields and what those values are. So I'm mirroring that exactly. And then one thing I'm doing a little bit more is actually giving you screenshots of like a real life example of some of the rules that actually go entered in here. I mean, I could have spent the time and just list these fields out like I listed the first 4, but that really doesn't add any value, right? You could see what the fields are going to be and what the like if you were creating an HMO, what values to enter in one particular field. So this is supposed to be mirroring that as your lab, right? You're going to create a plan. Here's what the task name is, create benefit plan. And this is the information that you would enter. This one, so instead of, for the rates, I didn't type it out, but I'm giving you a screenshot of, this is how you create the healthcare, you know, the task name to create the rate and what the fields that show up and the values that you need to enter. I do have the, the Workday provided guide for it. But this is exactly what that is in a screenshot manner. If I were to now like list it, instead of giving you the screenshot and list it, like field by field, then it will just, it would not be an efficient or productive thing to do, right? Because I'm going through like each screen and we're going through almost every single field what that value is going to be. For some things, it's a little bit easier, but certain times when actually if you just put it in the typical field by field, like I did for the healthcare coverage target, it doesn't make sense because when you look at the screen is not aligned. The screen doesn't look like this. The screen is actually horizontal grid. But I think you do have to go back to the video and see how it's laid out. Yeah, I guess both ways it got is pros and cons. But at least in this module, I'm giving you every single step as a separate tab that you need to configure. So let me quickly select. Well, for the worker plan eligibility, I need an eligibility rule that says, hey, the person is employed at least 20 hours and they're in the United States. So I don't see that. I'm going to have to make that rule, but it is time for the class to be over.